G just came on and said, hey, where are all the posts of everybody saying how much they love Geno and this and that? Haven't seen a lot of it. It's been since Friday.
That being teammates, not fans.
Yes,
and otherwise.
agreed.
That being inside.
And that
building.
fits with a lot of what we've heard inside that building, that Geno, and not just now, we've talked about this for a while, just that people didn't want to hear it. That Geno wasn't that kind of leader, that he wasn't the guy who his teammates just would lay everything on the line for, and that is important. It's not necessarily number one, the most important thing for a quarterback, but doesn't John Schneider say he wants a quarterback that'll tilt the room? Tell me how Geno tilts the room. That's just not who he is.
Yeah, and I think following, the end of Russell, which was challenging at the end, and it is always challenging with franchise quarterbacks, largely all around the league. We've talked about that and looked at that and the life expectancy of these guys. And when they get paid that amount of money, there's some animus and, your middle management, all the just different challenges that come with it. And ultimately, they had a number they were comfortable paying, and Geno was not in any way comfortable with that at all.
Yeah.
And I will be curious what he ends up getting in Vegas, by the way. Just as each day passed with the Seahawks, was kind of curious.
It's not a done deal like DK's.
No, it is not.
Yeah.
No, it is not.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Yeah.
Okay, but why, right? So we answered why Geno. We, in the best we could, why DK. What's number 3 on your little answer to the question, Jerk Tree?
Why now? Obviously, some of it is this is when their deals were up. I understand that. So some of it is dictated by forces that were just naturally occurring at this exact point where both of them had 1 year left in the deal, and that's where the conversation. That I know. But I don't think it's an accident that the timeline here is 1 year after Mike Macdonald took over. Okay. I asked yesterday, I texted our group, Brock and Maura and Lyle, sorry, Lyle, and just a little force of habit there. And I just asked, when has another team done this? Traded 2 guys like Geno and DK at the same time. And I'm sure there's examples. I can't come up with a lot of them, but the one you brought up, Brock, and it's not perfect, does, I think, tell a very interesting tale. And you brought up when, after 1 year here, Pete Carroll, Cut Hasselbeck, Carlson, and Lofa, those 3 guys kind of moved on from all 3 of them and started to change what they were doing here in Seattle after the 2010 season. And what it tells you is it takes a year to assess. Mike Macdonald comes in. You're not going to get rid of DK Metcalf right away. You get a honeymoon to figure that out.
He's a star, man. He's a star player.
You're not going to get rid of your starting quarterback before year 1 unless you know you've got the perfect option behind him, because you got to figure out who he is and know him and get to be around each other and determine just how much it's going to work. I don't think it's an accident that after 1 year of looking at both of them, again, I know obviously that their timing of their contracts is a big part of this. But don't you think it's important that 1 year into Mike Macdonald's assessing the situation, he says, all right, I'm ready to act. John, I don't need this. I don't need Geno at that price. I don't need DK at that price. Let's figure it out, do it another way, and I want to start building the team I want to build rather than with Pete Carroll's inherited goods.
By the way, also remember that Pete moved on from Jeremy Bates after 1 year, an offensive coordinator in a very similar vein of just kind of working with it, feeling it out, just not going to be the direction we're going to go. Mike Mayock was on with us, and it was just really prescient in many, many ways last week, just kind of talking about organizations around the league and how many of them, Salk, just don't compete because they don't have alignment. They don't have owner. They don't have GM. They don't have head coach. So let's take a step back and answer this question of why now? Why did this happen now? And let's look at it from those 3 different optics. The owner sat in that stadium and watched her team go 3-6. That owner sat in her stadium and watched Vikings fans and Green Bay fans and people from outside come in and infiltrate it in ways that had not been done. Buffalo Bills Mafia to that extent. But more than anything, they went 3-6. 7-1 on the road. Awesome. 3-6 at home. Not good enough. Where's the stars? Where's the jerseys? Where's the people to follow? Where's, the Russells and the Shermans and the Cams and the Bobby? Where's the stars? And it's like, I think from a GM perspective or an owner perspective, like, hey, bottom line is we got to keep this thing going, this mojo going, these 12s going, right? I've experienced it in my lifetime when it hasn't. I experienced when this was a Mariner town, when this was a Sonic town. It is a Seahawk town, and we got to keep it that way. So I think ownership there probably empowers those decisions. GM's in a situation where, like, okay, I got a chance here if we do this to reboot. 5 picks in the first 92 in a meat and potatoes draft where I can get some difference makers, right? I get a chance to free up $70-80 million of cap space and kind of reinvent this thing and surround now Mike, who I know, and we got a much better feel of what he wants and what I want, and we can blend this thing together with 5 picks in the first 92 and tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of salary cap. Let's go. So I think from a GM's perspective, there's, I think, some genuine excitement to rebuild this thing. And he's already done it before and did it pretty successfully with Pete the first time around. And then ultimately, I think you've answered the head coach. Head coach wants to dominate this thing at the line of scrimmage, first and foremost, and be a violent, physical, you do not want to play us kind of football team. That's what he was around in Baltimore. It's what he was around in Michigan. And now, along with the GM, going to have a lot of capital in this draft and in free agency to go about doing that.
Okay. All great points. So that starts to speak to the timing of it. And again, you can't have that conversation without recognizing that some of the timing is literally just about this is when their deals were up, and so that's why this was going to occur. Yep. Fully recognize that. So anything after that is a little bit more speculation, but that doesn't make it not a part of it. Again, there's not just one thing that leads to all of it. When we talk through why not Geno, there's not one answer. There's not one answer on DK. There's not one answer on the timing. All of these things play a role in how decisions get made. And if this had come up a year ago, I don't think Mike Macdonald would have been nearly in the position to say, hey, forget it, let's take a risk, because he was trying to get his feet under him. He needed to give this a chance to learn about the people that he was now coaching. Whereas now, I think it makes a whole lot more sense for him to be like, yeah, no, I get it now. I see who's who and what's what, and I don't need to go down this road. I can build it a different way. I've gotten to know these guys, and I'm ready to move on from both of them. Okay, fine. Okay. So what are they doing? This now, I think, is maybe the most interesting question.
Are we to question 4?
This is on to question 4.
Okay.
What are they doing?
Is there a plan?
Well, I'm sure there is a plan, but what's the plan? You know, Maura asked a great question. She says, you know, was this something they were always planning to do, or did they have to pivot once these guys decided they didn't want to get deals done? I don't know the answer to that.
You know, in a football game, Salk, and Clint Kubiak comes from this school. It's my life experience, a little different in Indy with Tom Moore and his system. But in a football game, and in preparation for that battle, you have a script. You have your first 15. You have a big call sheet with your third down calls, third and shorts, third and mediums, third and longs. You have your red zone calls, right? Defensive guys on the other side got their early downs, and they got their blitz, and they got their situational stuff, right? So you have all these great plans that you spend all this time getting ready for kickoff, and then the ball gets kicked. And then guess what happens to
a lot of it goes out the window?
There's still some structure, certainly within the situations and situational ball and a half and 2 minute and in third downs. You know, there's still structure, and you get to many of those calls. But you also got to adapt. And, you know, when the market changes, when the game changes, you got to adapt. And my gut and my hunch is what we've heard from many of these experts over the last 24 to 36 hours. John Schneider does not go into this willy-nilly without a plan. I think he's got an A. I think he's got a B. I think he's got a C when it comes to quarterback in particular.
Yeah. So are they rebuilding or are they competing?
Oh, I think they're absolutely competing. Yeah, I think, honestly, the team that came to my mind, and mostly because you're looking to sign their quarterback, was the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings. Right, they move on from Kirk Cousins, right? I think there's a whole bunch of parallels with what you saw in Minnesota. With a really accomplished offensive-minded head coach, you got a really accomplished defensive-minded head coach. But I think those held in very high esteem, and O'Connell and McDonald around the league. You had a Minnesota that moved on from Kirk Cousins, right? Atlanta signs him all this money, and you move on from that veteran quarterback. Oh, you're starting over. Oh, you signed Darnold to kind of a one-year deal, scrap heap guy. You're going to maybe draft. They ultimately do draft JJ. But lots of players leave. They're total rebuild.
But weren't they? Weren't they trying to rebuild? It just turns out that they were better than expected right off the bat.
Because I think internally they're like, we're not rebuilding anything. We got some good pieces here. We got good tackles, got great receiver, got some nice components defensively. We're going to run the football. We're going to play action. We're going to do these things. And I think in much the same vein, the Seahawks, like the Minnesota Vikings, they're not looking to totally rebuild or reset. We got a lot of nice pieces here. And now we're going to surround it with 4, 5, 6 of the right guys, kind of like the Washington Commanders football team did. Now, they had the number 2 pick, and that changes a lot. And they had a QB that they love. But what did they do? They signed 5, 6, 7 difference makers in free agency.
Yeah, I think a lot of this we'll find out in the next couple of days. And certainly a big part of the answer to what they're hoping to accomplish this year comes from what they do at the quarterback position, who they sign for how much, for how long, et cetera, and then leading into the draft. I mean, again, the difference between Minnesota last year and the Seahawks this year, Brock, is that Minnesota was entering a draft with 6 first-round picks at quarterback. The Seahawks are not. They're entering a draft that might only have 1 and maybe 2 or 3, but nobody seems to be all that wild about any of them and believe that if it was last year, none of them would have been in the first round. So, what do you do? If it's Aaron Rodgers, if it's Sam Darnold, okay, that tells you one thing.
I want them to sign Sam Darnold. Let me be just crystal clear about that.
Why?
I want them to sign Sam Darnold to a deal very similar to the structure that they signed Geno a couple years ago. That it is, and obviously with inflation and in a bigger cap, they're going to be a little bigger numbers that Geno got, right? But what was Geno, like 3 years, on paper, 100-something million bucks, but lots of escalators and incentives. But every year there was an out. Every year the team had that opportunity to guarantee, that next big bonus, and that just the construction of it made it very favorable to the team. Well, I would love that.